From the very first moment Meghan Markle became a public figure, the world was fascinated not only by her rise into the British royal family, but also by the intricate, often tense relationships she maintained with those closest to her. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. At the heart of this intrigue has always been her family. Her father, Thomas Markle, and her mother, Doria Ragland. For years, the public narrative surrounding Meghan's estrangement from her father was fragmented, muddled by tabloid speculation and half-truths. Headlines screamed about family feuds, betrayal, and cruelty, but the truth has remained much more layered, calculated, and heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. In this video, we will peel back the layers, examining the real story behind Meghan's decision to distance herself from her father, and reveal the previously untold perspectives from both Thomas Markle and Doria Ragland. Imagine for a moment the private world of Meghan Markle before she became a duchess. As a young girl growing up in Los Angeles, Meghan was ambitious, bright, and endlessly curious about the world beyond her immediate surroundings. She observed her parents closely, absorbing both their strengths and weaknesses, forming opinions about trust, loyalty, and the meaning of family. Thomas Markle, her father, had a career in the media industry that often placed him in the public eye, while Doria Ragland provided a stabilizing, nurturing presence, grounding Meghan with love, guidance, and an awareness of self-worth. Early on, Meghan learned valuable lessons about ambition, resilience, and independence. Yet, hidden beneath these formative experiences were subtle fractures, moments of disappointment, hints of conflict, and actions that would later resonate in ways she could never have anticipated. The turning point in Meghan's familial journey came not from one dramatic event, but from a slow, dawning realization that her father had been compromising their family's private life in pursuit of public attention. Tabloids, known for their relentless pursuit of scandal, had been courting Thomas Markle, offering financial incentives for interviews, staged photographs, and exclusive insights into his daughter's life. What may have started as casual interactions, perhaps framed as harmless exchanges with the media, soon revealed themselves to be breaches of trust of the deepest kind. For Meghan, the discovery was devastating. Each phone call, each personal moment she shared, could be commodified overnight, transformed into headlines, gossip, and sensationalized stories. The very person she had trusted most, her father, had turned private family life into a transaction. Understanding Meghan's response requires a deep look into the psychology of betrayal. Betrayal by a loved one is not merely about hurt feelings. It is about the erosion of a fundamental sense of safety and trust. When Thomas Markle accepted payments from tabloids, Meghan was faced with a harrowing choice: continue a relationship with a man who had undermined the very foundation of their bond, or take decisive steps to protect herself from further exploitation. Her decision to distance herself was not a move born of cruelty or disregard, but rather a protective, calculated response to circumstances that threatened her personal and professional life. Every action she took following that realization was measured, grounded in self-preservation, and informed by the knowledge that public scrutiny could be relentless and unforgiving. Equally important in this story is Doria Ragland's role. As Meghan's mother, Doria understood the delicate balance between familial loyalty and the need for boundaries. She witnessed firsthand the emotional toll that betrayal by a parent can exact, and her guidance helped Meghan navigate this treacherous terrain. Doria's perspective is crucial because it adds nuance to a narrative often reduced to headlines and gossip. Through her insights, we begin to see that Meghan's estrangement was not a simple story of anger or resentment, but a complex decision informed by love, protection, and an acute awareness of the dangers of public exposure. Doria's voice provides clarity, allowing us to understand the interplay between familial love and self-preservation in Meghan's life. To fully appreciate the magnitude of Meghan's decision, we must also consider the pressures inherent in her public life. As a member of the British royal family, her actions were scrutinized not just by the media, but by millions of people worldwide. Every interaction with her family could be amplified, dissected, and criticized, creating an environment in which trust became both vital and fragile. This context helps explain why Meghan's response to discovering her father's actions was so resolute. In a world where privacy is a luxury and betrayal can have far-reaching consequences, she chose to prioritize her security and mental well-being, even at the cost of familial closeness. The story of Meghan's estrangement is not just a tale of betrayal. It is also a story about the choices we make when confronted with ethical dilemmas within families. How does one weigh loyalty against self-preservation? When trust is violated, what steps are necessary to reclaim agency and maintain dignity? Meghan's journey offers a compelling exploration of these questions, providing lessons not just for royal observers, but for anyone who has ever faced difficult decisions about trust, loyalty, and the limits of forgiveness. By listening to the voices of Thomas Markle and Doria Ragland, we gain insight into the complexity of family relationships and the profound impact of betrayal on personal identity. This video will take you through each step of the narrative, from the early days of Meghan's life and her relationship with her parents, to the shocking revelation that reshaped her trust, to the public scrutiny and personal reflection that followed. Along the way, we will hear directly from those who were at the center of the story, analyzing their words, actions, and emotions. We will examine the ethical and emotional dimensions of their decisions, exploring how personal choice intersects with public responsibility. The aim is not merely to recount events, but to provide a window into the human experience behind the headlines. As we embark on this journey, consider this: trust, once broken, is not easily restored. The decisions we make in the aftermath of betrayal define us, shape our relationships, and influence the path our lives take. Meghan Markle's response to her father's actions was emblematic of a broader struggle faced by many: how to balance familial loyalty with self-protection, how to navigate love and disappointment, and how to maintain dignity in the face of public scrutiny. By understanding her story, we can better grasp the delicate interplay of trust, betrayal, and resilience that underpins human relationships. In the next sections, we will explore Thomas Markle's motivations, Doria Ragland's perspective, and the series of events that led to the estrangement. We will provide detailed accounts of the media's involvement, the emotional toll on Meghan, and the broader implications of her decision. By examining the facts alongside personal testimonies, we aim to create a comprehensive portrait of a family navigating extraordinary circumstances, shedding light on the realities behind the sensational headlines. To further grasp the depth of Meghan's choices, we must consider the emotional weight of witnessing betrayal from someone who was meant to be a pillar of support. In many families, parents serve as anchors, providing guidance, protection, and a sense of security. When that foundation is shaken, the ripple effects can be profound, influencing not only immediate decisions but long-term perceptions of relationships, trust, and self-worth. Meghan's realization that her father had been monetizing private moments was more than an upset. It was a profound violation of intimacy and confidence. It was the kind of revelation that forces a person to confront the uncomfortable truth that someone they loved and trusted could, perhaps unknowingly or under personal pressure, act against their well-being. At the same time, this story challenges common narratives about family and morality. In popular discourse, estrangement is often framed as a sign of anger, rebellion, or immaturity. Meghan's experience, however, reveals a far more nuanced reality. Distancing oneself from a parent can be an act of survival, a calculated measure to preserve emotional, psychological, and even physical safety. It is an acknowledgement that love does not require blind tolerance of betrayal, and that boundaries, though painful, are essential in maintaining one's integrity and agency. By understanding this, audiences can approach the story with a sense of empathy rather than judgment, appreciating the complexities behind what might otherwise appear as a straightforward family feud. Furthermore, the influence of the media cannot be overstated in this narrative. Tabloids thrive on sensationalism, and Meghan's rise to prominence made her an irresistible target. The exploitation of her family by media outlets created a dynamic in which private actions became public currency, each betrayal amplified in ways that intensified emotional distress. Thomas Markle's interactions with the press, while perhaps intended to maintain his relevance or financial security, inadvertently placed Meghan in an impossible position. Forced to navigate public scrutiny, protect her personal boundaries, and respond to violations of trust, all under the gaze of millions. The public often sees only the surface, the estrangement, the headlines, the emotional fallout, but rarely the intricate web of pressures and ethical dilemmas that shape decisions like Meghan's. Equally compelling is the role of perspective in interpreting these events. Thomas Markle, often portrayed in the media as the antagonist in Meghan's story, had his own narrative, motivations, and vulnerabilities. Understanding his viewpoint does not excuse betrayal, but it adds layers of complexity to the story. Perhaps he saw his actions as harmless, or as a means of securing his own financial stability in a world that can be unforgiving. Doria Ragland, by contrast, offers clarity and protection, highlighting how supportive family structures can help navigate betrayal and reinforce resilience. Together, their perspectives illuminate the human elements behind the sensationalism, the fears, the missteps, and the attempts at reconciliation that are often hidden from public view. The introduction also serves to underscore the stakes of this story. Meghan's decision to distance herself was not made lightly, nor was it simply a private matter. It intersected with her public persona, her career, her responsibilities within the royal framework, and her own emotional health. Each choice carried consequences, both immediate and long-term, shaping public perception and personal well-being. By beginning the narrative here, we set the stage for understanding the gravity of what followed, the nuanced interplay of trust and betrayal, and the courage required to prioritize one's own sense of self in the midst of familial and public pressures. Finally, this introduction aims to prepare the audience for a journey through emotion, revelation, and reflection. We will delve into the intricate dynamics of Meghan's family, unpack the precise moments that led to estrangement, and explore the broader implications of trust, privacy, and resilience. The story will balance personal insight with factual reporting, human emotion with analytical depth, and narrative tension with reflective clarity. Viewers will not only gain a fuller understanding of why Meghan made the choices she did, but also an appreciation for the broader themes of loyalty, ethics, and self-preservation that resonate far beyond this single family. As we transition into the main content, keep these questions in mind. How do we measure loyalty in relationships that have been compromised? What does it truly take to protect oneself from repeated betrayal? And, in the face of public scrutiny, how do personal decisions about family and trust become amplified in ways that challenge even the most resilient individuals? The answers will unfold in the sections ahead, through a meticulous examination of events, insights from those at the center, and a deep dive into the human experience behind the headlines. To truly understand Meghan Markle's later choices, particularly her estrangement from her father, we must first travel back to the early days of her life. Meghan's upbringing in Los Angeles was far from ordinary. She was born into a family of contrasts. A father deeply entrenched in media and entertainment, and a mother whose presence provided calm, stability, and nurturing support. From a young age, Meghan observed two very different models of behavior and influence. These early observations shaped her understanding of trust, loyalty, and family responsibility. They planted the seeds for the strong, independent, and cautious woman she would later become. Meghan's father, Thomas Markle, was an accomplished lighting director in the film and television industry. His career offered glimpses of creativity, ambition, and achievement, yet it also exposed Meghan to the pressures and pitfalls of public attention. Though Thomas loved his daughter, his engagement with the media sometimes introduced complexity and unpredictability into their relationship. Small decisions, such as agreeing to interviews or interacting with tabloids, were not just ordinary parental choices. They carried consequences that Meghan would later discover could affect her deeply. From an early age, she witnessed the tension between public perception and private truth, a duality that would become central to her life. Meanwhile, Doria Ragland, Meghan's mother, provided balance and stability. Doria's presence was a grounding force, offering Meghan unconditional support, guidance, and a model of emotional intelligence. She taught Meghan resilience, how to assess situations thoughtfully, and how to set boundaries even with those closest to her. Doria understood that nurturing a child's independence also meant preparing her for the realities of a world that could be both opportunistic and intrusive. Through her mother, Meghan learned to value personal agency, the importance of trust, and the boundaries necessary to maintain self-respect in a complex, often judgmental society. Even in her childhood, Meghan displayed a remarkable sense of awareness and empathy. Teachers and family friends recalled a girl who was perceptive beyond her years, noticing subtle shifts in mood, intent, and behavior around her. These early perceptions allowed Meghan to understand relationships not merely in terms of affection but also in terms of reliability and integrity. She learned to read signals, anticipate consequences, and measure the alignment between words and actions. This skill would later become invaluable when navigating the delicate, high-stakes dynamics of her adult life, particularly in her relationship with her father and the scrutiny of public life. Meghan's upbringing also involved moments of tension and subtle conflict that foreshadowed her later decisions. As a child, she occasionally encountered behaviors from her father that were inconsistent, unpredictable, or focused on personal gain rather than familial loyalty. While small at the time, these experiences built an early awareness that trust could be conditional, and that even those closest to her were capable of actions with far-reaching consequences. In contrast, Doria's consistency and support reinforced the possibility that trust, once earned, could be reliable. This dichotomy between her parents, Thomas's volatility and Doria's steadfastness, created a complex framework for Meghan's understanding of relationships. Another critical element of Meghan's early life was her exposure to media and celebrity culture. Growing up in Los Angeles, she was acutely aware of the power of public perception and the opportunities and risks inherent in fame. Family dinners, private conversations, and even casual outings could be observed, analyzed, and exploited by external forces. This environment made the eventual betrayal by her father all the more devastating. Meghan had learned early on to value privacy, yet she also realized that not all family members might honor that principle. The combination of her father's media interactions and her mother's protective guidance created a constant tension between curiosity and caution, trust and vigilance. School experiences further reinforced Meghan's sense of empathy and resilience. She often found herself bridging gaps between classmates, mediating conflicts, and observing interpersonal dynamics with a keen eye. These experiences, though ordinary in many ways, contributed to her understanding of human behavior, motivations, and the complexities of social relationships. Meghan learned to read people, anticipate challenges, and navigate emotionally charged situations with intelligence and sensitivity. These skills, cultivated in childhood, would later inform her approach to high-pressure scenarios, including the public fallout with her father and the intense scrutiny of royal life. Despite these early skills and awareness, Meghan's relationship with her father maintained a semblance of normalcy. They shared moments of closeness, laughter, and familial warmth. However, underlying this surface-level connection were signs of inconsistency and a lack of reliability. While Thomas provided affection and support at times, his decisions, particularly regarding media interactions, planted seeds of doubt in Meghan's mind. She began to understand that love alone was not enough. Trust had to be demonstrated through action, not words. This distinction would prove crucial when she later confronted the reality of her father's dealings with the press. Family anecdotes reveal the nuanced dynamics that characterized Meghan's upbringing. Friends recall Thomas being charming, witty, and generous, yet occasionally self-serving in ways that disrupted family cohesion. Doria, conversely, consistently emphasized integrity, accountability, and thoughtful decision-making. Through these contrasting examples, Meghan developed a sophisticated moral framework, one that balanced emotional connection with practical assessment of trustworthiness. She understood that relationships could be layered, complex, and sometimes contradictory, a lesson that would shape her choices as she entered adulthood. The duality in Meghan's early life, between exposure to media opportunism and the grounding influence of a protective mother, also fostered her strong sense of personal identity. She learned to define herself not solely through the lens of others' expectations, but through her own values, principles, and moral compass. This internal fortitude would later become essential as she faced the challenges of estrangement, public judgment, and navigating high-profile relationships under intense scrutiny. At the same time, Meghan's childhood experiences highlighted the emotional stakes involved in family trust. She witnessed firsthand how small actions could escalate into public consequences, and how betrayal, even if unintentional or motivated by personal gain, could fracture relationships irrevocably. The lessons she learned during these formative years created a foundation of caution, discernment, and emotional resilience, preparing her for the complexities of her later interactions with her father and the media. The lessons she learned during these formative years created a foundation of caution, discernment, and emotional resilience, preparing her for the complexities of her later interactions with her father and the media. By the time Meghan reached adolescence, she had already begun to develop a nuanced understanding of loyalty, integrity, and personal boundaries. She recognized that familial love, while deeply important, did not absolve someone of responsibility or accountability. These early realizations set the stage for the difficult decisions she would later make regarding estrangement from her father, a choice rooted not in emotion alone, but in a careful evaluation of trust, risk, and self-preservation. The stage was set for a young woman who would grow to navigate extraordinary pressures with insight, resilience, and calculated decision-making. Meghan's early life and family dynamics were far from perfect, but they provided the tools and perspective she would need when confronted with betrayal, public scrutiny, and the necessity of making choices that prioritized her well-being. Her upbringing underscores a central theme. Trust, once broken, is never trivial, and the decision to protect oneself is often more complex and courageous than outsiders can imagine. Thomas Markle's life story is complex, layered, and marked by both accomplishments and controversies. Understanding him is essential to understanding the forces that shaped Meghan's perception of trust and loyalty. Thomas was a man who lived in the spotlight long before Meghan's rise to prominence, working as a lighting director in film and television, a career that demanded creativity, technical skill, and the ability to navigate high-pressure environments. His work placed him among Hollywood elites, exposing him to the glamour, competition, and sometimes ruthlessness of the entertainment industry. This exposure, while professionally rewarding, also influenced how he approached relationships, communication, and his interactions with the media. In many ways, Thomas's career success shaped his worldview. He understood the value of public image, the leverage that media exposure could provide, and the tangible rewards that came from sharing personal or insider information. This understanding, however, had its downsides. As he engaged with tabloid reporters and entertainment outlets, the line between personal life and public consumption became increasingly blurred. Family moments that would have remained private in a typical household were now opportunities for attention, negotiation, and financial gain. For Meghan, these dynamics created early lessons about the complexities of trust. She saw that someone she loved and relied upon could prioritize external benefits over the sanctity of private bonds. Despite these challenges, Thomas was not absent from Meghan's life. He provided affection, shared milestones, and expressed pride in his daughter's accomplishments. Friends and colleagues often described him as charismatic, witty, and capable of genuine warmth. Yet, the consistency of these positive behaviors was sometimes overshadowed by decisions that undermined trust. The very qualities that made him appealing, his charm, social savvy, and media acumen, could also make him unpredictable and unreliable in contexts where discretion and loyalty mattered most. Meghan's early recognition of these traits informed her growing understanding that love alone could not guarantee security or integrity in a relationship. One of the most pivotal elements of Thomas's life was his eventual involvement with tabloids. In his later years, as Meghan's public profile soared, he began accepting payments for interviews, staged photographs, and media commentary about his daughter's life. While some may argue that these actions were driven by financial necessity or a desire to maintain relevance, the consequences were profound. For Meghan, every personal disclosure, every private conversation, and every intimate family moment risked being exploited for public consumption. This was not a theoretical concern. It became painfully real as Thomas's interactions with the media unfolded. The emotional weight of knowing that her father had monetized her life would later contribute directly to her decision to distance herself. The impact of this behavior on Meghan cannot be overstated. The betrayal was not merely financial, it was deeply personal. Trust, once broken, affects how individuals relate to those closest to them. Meghan had relied on her father for guidance, support, and the reassurance of unconditional love. Discovering that he had allowed private family details to become commodities in tabloid negotiations shattered that sense of safety. Each call she made, each message she sent, carried the potential for exposure, transforming ordinary interactions into high-stakes calculations. This realization forced Meghan to reevaluate her familial relationships and prioritize her own well-being, even at the cost of personal closeness with her father. Thomas's actions were compounded by the broader context of public scrutiny. As Meghan's prominence increased, so too did media attention, often sensationalized and unrelenting. The British tabloids, known for their aggressive pursuit of royal-related stories, amplified the fallout from Thomas's decisions, framing the estrangement as scandalous or morally questionable. Yet, beneath the headlines lay a far more complex story. A father navigating fame, financial pressures, and personal vulnerabilities, and a daughter grappling with betrayal, trust, and self-preservation. Understanding this duality is crucial to appreciating the nuanced dynamics at play. Another dimension of Thomas Markle's life was his relationship with his own identity and sense of self. For many in the public eye, there is a tension between personal fulfillment and external validation. Thomas, having worked in Hollywood and seen the power of media attention firsthand, likely understood the appeal of recognition, relevance, and financial security. However, the methods he employed, engaging with tabloids and monetizing family moments, illustrate the potential cost of prioritizing self-interest over relational integrity. Meghan's awareness of these dynamics, developed over years of observation and experience, informed her eventual decisions and reinforced the importance of protective boundaries. Yet, it is important to note that Thomas was not simply a villain in this narrative. He demonstrated affection, provided guidance at times, and expressed genuine care for his daughter. The complexity lies in the inconsistency of his actions. Love and betrayal were intertwined, creating confusion, emotional strain, and moral ambiguity. Meghan's response, distancing herself, was not a rejection of love, but a calculated move to maintain personal safety and integrity. It was a response shaped by insight, reflection, and the recognition that maintaining trust in the face of repeated breaches is both difficult and sometimes impossible. Family anecdotes further illuminate this duality. Friends and colleagues often recount instances where Thomas displayed generosity, humor, and warmth toward Meghan. At the same time, moments of unpredictability, poor judgment, and media exploitation created tension and strain. These contrasting behaviors contributed to Meghan's perception of her father as a complicated figure, someone capable of deep love, yet equally capable of actions that undermined familial trust. Understanding this complexity is critical to interpreting Meghan's choices. Her estrangement was not an impulsive reaction, but the culmination of years of observation, reflection, and emotional processing. The narrative of Thomas Markle also highlights the broader challenges of parenthood in a world dominated by media scrutiny. Parents must navigate the delicate balance between supporting their children, maintaining their own autonomy, and negotiating the pressures of public exposure. Thomas's experience exemplifies how missteps in this balance can have profound consequences, particularly when children are sensitive to issues of trust and loyalty. Meghan's eventual distancing was a protective response to a dynamic that had grown increasingly untenable, illustrating the difficult choices faced by individuals when personal boundaries and family loyalty collide. At the same time, Thomas's story underscores the human capacity for regret and reflection. In later interviews and statements, he expressed awareness of the consequences of his actions and the pain they caused his daughter. While these reflections cannot undo past breaches of trust, they offer insight into his awareness of the emotional stakes involved. Meghan's careful navigation of her relationship with her father reflects both an understanding of human complexity and a commitment to prioritizing her own well-being, demonstrating emotional intelligence and resilience developed over years of observation and experience. Finally, Thomas Markle's complicated role in Meghan's life provides context for the broader narrative of estrangement. His actions, while motivated by personal considerations, intersected with public scrutiny, family dynamics, and Meghan's developing understanding of trust. The lessons gleaned from this section are clear. Relationships are complex, trust is fragile, and protective boundaries are sometimes necessary to safeguard emotional and psychological health. Meghan's decisions were shaped not by a desire for conflict, but by a careful assessment of risk, loyalty, and self-preservation, an approach informed by years of observing her father's strengths, weaknesses, and choices. While much of the public conversation about Meghan Markle's family has centered on her father, it is impossible to fully understand Meghan's upbringing, resilience, and moral compass without examining the profound influence of her mother, Doria Ragland. Doria's role in Meghan's life was both stabilizing and empowering. She provided a consistent, grounding presence that offered emotional security in a household often marked by complexity and unpredictability. Through Doria, Meghan learned the values of self-respect, discernment, and emotional intelligence, qualities that would later inform her decisions about trust, loyalty, and the boundaries she needed to set with her father. Doria's background is integral to understanding the foundation she laid for Meghan. A woman of strength, intelligence, and compassion, Doria pursued her career and personal passions while also prioritizing the well-being of her daughter. She instilled in Meghan an awareness of personal agency and the importance of education, independent thought, and ethical integrity. These lessons were imparted not through lectures alone, but through example. In the way Doria carried herself, navigated challenges, and maintained her own standards of honesty and self-respect. Meghan absorbed these lessons deeply, internalizing them as guiding principles for her own life, particularly in moments of conflict or betrayal. One of the most crucial aspects of Doria's influence was her understanding of the interplay between love and accountability. She taught Meghan that affection alone does not excuse harmful behavior, and that it is possible to love someone while still setting firm boundaries to protect oneself. This philosophy became critical when Meghan discovered her father's interactions with the media. While many outsiders interpreted her estrangement as a cold or calculated move, the reality was rooted in the values her mother had instilled. Love must coexist with integrity, and personal well-being cannot be sacrificed, even for family. Doria also nurtured Meghan's sense of empathy and social awareness. From an early age, Meghan observed her mother's compassion for others and her capacity to approach complex situations with thoughtfulness and clarity. Whether it was through volunteer work, interpersonal mediation, or simple everyday interactions, Doria modeled a careful balance of emotional intelligence and practical decision-making. Meghan learned that understanding the perspectives of others is valuable, but that empathy must not come at the expense of self-protection. This lesson would prove vital when navigating the complexities of her relationship with her father and the media's relentless intrusion into her life. Family anecdotes illustrate the depth of Doria's influence. Friends and acquaintances recall instances where Doria quietly but firmly guided Meghan through difficult social or emotional situations, offering insight, reassurance, and perspective. She emphasized the importance of discernment, teaching Meghan to evaluate not only what people say, but how their actions align with their words. This emphasis on integrity and consistency became a touchstone for Meghan, informing her judgment in later years when faced with the profound betrayal of trust by her father. Another critical element of Doria's role was her support of Meghan's independence. Unlike some parental figures who may encourage conformity or limit autonomy, Doria actively fostered Meghan's confidence in her own judgment and abilities. She encouraged Meghan to explore opportunities, make decisions based on her values, and develop a strong sense of self. This empowerment created the foundation for Meghan's later capacity to make difficult choices, such as distancing herself from her father, without being paralyzed by guilt or fear of societal judgment. Doria's guidance ensured that Meghan's decision-making was rooted in clarity, self-awareness, and courage. Doria's influence extended beyond emotional and moral guidance. She also helped Meghan navigate the practical realities of life in a household where media attention and public scrutiny were ever present. Growing up in Los Angeles, where celebrity culture and media scrutiny are pervasive, Meghan quickly learned the risks associated with public exposure. Doria's calm and steady presence provided a counterbalance to the sensationalism and pressures surrounding them. She emphasized the importance of discretion, caution, and awareness, teaching Meghan to protect her personal life while engaging meaningfully with the world. These lessons would later become essential as Meghan navigated not only her father's betrayals, but also the intense scrutiny of life in the royal spotlight. The emotional support Doria provided was equally crucial. Adolescence and early adulthood can be periods of profound vulnerability, particularly when familial relationships are complicated by inconsistencies or breaches of trust. Doria offered Meghan a safe space to process feelings, evaluate situations, and build resilience. This consistent presence allowed Meghan to approach challenges with clarity and emotional strength, even when confronted with the disheartening reality of her father's media engagements. Doria's steady guidance ensured that Meghan's responses were measured, thoughtful, and informed by both moral consideration and self-preservation. Doria also instilled in Meghan a deep understanding of ethical responsibility and accountability. She emphasized that actions, particularly those with far-reaching consequences, must be weighed carefully, and that integrity requires courage, even when difficult choices create tension or conflict. These values became particularly relevant as Meghan navigated her father's actions. The decision to cut off contact was not taken lightly. It was informed by the principles Doria had imparted over years of consistent mentorship. Trust must be earned, boundaries must be respected, and personal integrity must be upheld at all costs. Equally significant was Doria's modeling of resilience in the face of public and private challenges. Observing her mother's composed response to adversity, Meghan learned that emotional strength does not require stoicism, but rather a measured approach to obstacles, informed by reflection, clarity, and strategic action. This approach became central to Meghan's handling of her father's betrayals, the media's intrusion, and the public scrutiny of her personal life. Doria's influence provided Meghan with a framework for navigating complexity without sacrificing her sense of self or moral compass. Throughout Meghan's upbringing, Doria's guidance emphasized the importance of discerning loyalty, evaluating intentions, and prioritizing personal well-being. These lessons were essential in shaping Meghan's understanding of human relationships and the necessity of protective boundaries. By fostering both empathy and prudence, Doria equipped Meghan with the tools to recognize when trust had been compromised and to respond in a way that safeguarded her emotional and psychological health. In this sense, Doria's influence was both preventative and empowering, preparing Meghan to confront betrayal with clarity, courage, and measured action. The depth of Doria's impact is further illuminated when considering Meghan's public life. As she ascended into the global spotlight, the principles instilled by her mother provided a moral and emotional anchor. Doria's emphasis on integrity, trust, and self-protection informed Meghan's decisions in high-stakes situations, reinforcing the lessons learned during childhood. The grounding provided by Doria allowed Meghan to navigate complex social, familial, and professional dynamics with a sense of confidence and self-assuredness, even amidst controversy and intense media attention. In summary, Doria Ragland's role in Meghan Markle's life was foundational. She provided emotional stability, ethical guidance, and practical wisdom, creating a framework that enabled Meghan to navigate the challenges posed by her father's actions and the pressures of public scrutiny. Through Doria, Meghan learned the value of empathy balanced with discernment, the importance of protective boundaries, and the necessity of acting in accordance with one's principles. Doria's influence was both subtle and profound, shaping Meghan into a resilient, thoughtful, and principled individual capable of making difficult decisions when trust was breached. The turning point in Meghan Markle's relationship with her father, Thomas Markle, was not sudden. It was the culmination of years of subtle signs, media interactions, and betrayals that had slowly eroded trust. What made this moment particularly devastating was the realization that the man she had relied upon most, her father, had knowingly allowed private family moments to be commodified by the press. This section explores, in detail, how Meghan discovered the betrayal, the emotional consequences, and the broader context of tabloid culture that made the situation so explosive. To fully understand the magnitude of Meghan's discovery, one must first appreciate the environment in which she grew up. Los Angeles, the city where she spent her formative years, is a world dominated by celebrity, media scrutiny, and the constant tension between private life and public exposure. From an early age, Meghan witnessed firsthand the consequences of media attention on personal relationships. Stories could be distorted, private conversations could be published as news, and the lives of individuals, especially those connected to the entertainment industry, could become public property overnight. These experiences instilled in her a heightened awareness of privacy, trust, and the potential for betrayal. However, no amount of preparation could fully shield her from the shock that came when she realized her father had crossed a line. The specific events leading to Meghan's discovery of Thomas's tabloid dealings unfolded over several years. Initially, the interactions might have seemed harmless or opportunistic, an interview here, a photograph there, perhaps framed as casual discussions with reporters. Yet, as the pieces fell into place, Meghan recognized a pattern. Her father had been accepting payments for staged photos, exclusive interviews, and media commentary that exposed intimate details about her life. Each interaction was a transactional betrayal, converting private moments into profit without her consent. The magnitude of this realization cannot be overstated. For a daughter who had trusted her father implicitly, it was a profound shock to the system, one that reverberated emotionally, psychologically, and socially. The emotional impact of discovering this betrayal was immediate and severe. Meghan felt humiliated, betrayed, and vulnerable. Every conversation she had with her father, every private interaction, could potentially become fodder for public consumption. The intimacy of family life, conversations, holidays, milestones, was no longer sacred. It had been compromised. The betrayal was not abstract or theoretical. It was tangible, measurable, and invasive. Meghan faced a reality in which her sense of security, cultivated over decades of trust and familial closeness, had been irreparably damaged. The weight of this realization forced her to confront difficult questions. How could she maintain a relationship with someone who had monetized her life? How could she protect herself from further exploitation? And, perhaps most painfully, how could she reconcile the love she felt for her father with the breach of trust he had committed? Understanding Thomas Markle's motivations helps provide context, though it does not excuse the betrayal. From his perspective, the tabloid interactions may have seemed pragmatic, perhaps driven by financial necessity, a desire for relevance, or a lack of awareness of the emotional consequences. Yet, for Meghan, the result was the same. The sanctity of familial trust had been violated. In these moments, Meghan was faced with a moral and emotional reckoning. The decision she would soon make to distance herself was rooted not in anger alone, but in careful consideration of personal safety, emotional integrity, and the practical realities of living under constant public scrutiny. The tabloid culture itself played a critical role in magnifying the betrayal. The British press, with its relentless appetite for sensational stories about the royal family, amplified every misstep, rumor, and perceived scandal. What may have started as isolated, private interactions between Thomas and reporters became fodder for a global audience, intensifying the emotional stakes for Meghan. Headlines framed the estrangement as dramatic, morally ambiguous, and controversial, while omitting the context of trust, privacy, and familial loyalty that underpinned her decision. The pressure of being constantly scrutinized, coupled with the knowledge that her father had willingly participated in exposing her private life, created a uniquely difficult situation. Meghan was not merely dealing with familial disappointment. She was navigating a public, almost performative betrayal with far-reaching consequences. The discovery process was gradual and painful. Meghan began to piece together evidence of her father's dealings, noticing inconsistencies in his explanations, observing the timing of tabloid releases, and receiving confirmations from trusted sources. Each revelation added layers of emotional weight, from disbelief to hurt to anger. It was not a singular moment but a series of realizations that compounded over time, making the eventual estrangement an inevitable outcome of prolonged exposure to betrayal. The emotional labor required to process this information was immense, particularly given the additional pressures of public attention, professional responsibilities, and personal relationships. Psychologically, Meghan's reaction to the betrayal reflects the universal impact of trust violations. Studies in behavioral psychology indicate that betrayal by a close family member can provoke a range of emotional responses, including grief, anxiety, and hypervigilance. Meghan's response, distancing herself from her father, can be seen as a form of self-preservation, a protective mechanism to safeguard emotional well-being and maintain control over her personal life. This decision, while difficult and emotionally taxing, demonstrates a level of emotional intelligence and strategic thinking that underscores Meghan's capacity to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics. The narrative also underscores the ethical dimensions of Thomas Markle's actions. By accepting payments from tabloids for information and images about his daughter, he engaged in behavior that, while legally permissible, raised profound moral questions. The violation of trust was not a matter of miscommunication or oversight. It was a deliberate action with foreseeable consequences. Meghan's awareness of the ethical breach informed her response, reinforcing the necessity of establishing boundaries and protecting herself from further harm. Doria Ragland's influence in this context was pivotal. As Meghan processed the betrayal, her mother provided both emotional support and practical guidance. Doria's presence ensured that Meghan's response was measured, principled, and informed by her values. Rather than reacting impulsively or out of anger, Meghan was able to make a calculated decision grounded in self-preservation and moral clarity. Doria's support highlights the importance of strong familial anchors in navigating crises, even when the crisis itself is rooted in familial betrayal. The public narrative surrounding the estrangement often obscures these nuanced realities. Media outlets frequently portrayed Meghan as cold or ungrateful, focusing on sensationalism rather than the underlying causes of her actions. By examining the details of the tabloid interactions and the emotional impact of these betrayals, we gain a clearer understanding of the gravity of the situation. Meghan's decision was not a whimsical choice or a simple family quarrel. It was the culmination of years of exposure to betrayal, ethical breaches, and the pressures of public scrutiny. Her response reflects a deeply considered approach to safeguarding herself, her privacy, and her emotional integrity. Ultimately, the tabloid connection and the betrayal it represents serve as the catalyst for Meghan's estrangement. This discovery forced her to reevaluate her relationship with her father, assess the risks associated with continued contact, and make decisions that prioritized her well-being. It is a story that resonates beyond the specifics of celebrity and royalty, illustrating universal themes of trust, loyalty, and the consequences of ethical breaches within families. Meghan's experience underscores the profound emotional and moral complexity inherent in family relationships, particularly when compounded by external pressures such as media scrutiny, financial incentives, and public perception. This section sets the stage for the next phase of the narrative: the decision-making process that led Meghan to cut ties with her father, and the resulting consequences for her family, her public image, and her own emotional health. By examining the tabloid interactions in detail, we gain insight into the emotional stakes, ethical dilemmas, and strategic considerations that defined Meghan's response to betrayal. The decision to cut ties with a parent is one of the most difficult choices any individual can face. For Meghan Markle, the choice to distance herself from her father, Thomas Markle, was neither impulsive nor made in anger alone. It was the culmination of years of reflection, observation, and a painful recognition that trust, once broken, may not be fully reparable. This section explores the internal deliberations, emotional struggles, and practical considerations that led Meghan to take this step, illuminating the depth of her courage, resilience, and emotional intelligence. To begin, it is essential to understand the gravity of estrangement. Cutting off contact with a parent carries enormous psychological, social, and emotional consequences. It involves reconciling love with disappointment, navigating societal judgment, and coping with feelings of guilt, loss, and grief. Meghan faced these challenges acutely, compounded by her public life and the relentless scrutiny that accompanied every personal decision she made. Unlike private citizens, her actions were magnified by global media attention, adding a layer of external pressure to an already fraught emotional landscape. Every choice was analyzed, critiqued, and interpreted by millions, yet the core of her decision remained deeply personal and grounded in a need for self-protection. The process of making this decision was gradual. Meghan did not arrive at estrangement overnight. She carefully weighed the consequences, considering both her emotional needs and the practical realities of her circumstances. She evaluated her father's repeated breaches of trust, the patterns of behavior that demonstrated inconsistency, and the tangible evidence of media involvement. Each incident, interviews, staged photos, and commentary, reinforced the conclusion that continued contact would jeopardize her emotional well-being and personal security. Meghan's decision reflects a sophisticated understanding of human behavior, boundaries, and the importance of protecting oneself from repeated harm. Emotionally, this was a period of profound struggle. Meghan experienced a complex mix of love, disappointment, anger, and grief. On one hand, she had a deep, inherent affection for her father, shaped by decades of familial bonds and shared experiences. On the other, she recognized that these feelings could not override the ethical and emotional breach that had occurred. The internal conflict required significant reflection, emotional processing, and the courage to act in accordance with her principles. Estrangement, in this context, was not a rejection of love but a protective strategy to maintain her dignity, privacy, and autonomy. Doria Ragland's guidance was instrumental during this period. As a grounding influence, Doria provided Meghan with perspective, reassurance, and practical advice. She emphasized the importance of boundaries, ethical considerations, and long-term emotional well-being. Through Doria's support, Meghan was able to approach the decision with clarity, ensuring that it was based on careful deliberation rather than reactive emotion. This maternal guidance illustrates the critical role that supportive relationships can play in navigating profound personal dilemmas, particularly when trust has been violated. Another factor influencing Meghan's decision was the broader context of her public life. As a member of the British royal family, her personal decisions were inevitably scrutinized, dissected, and sensationalized. Any perceived misstep could be amplified, misinterpreted, or used to shape public perception. This external pressure magnified the stakes of her estrangement, making it not only a personal choice but also a strategic decision about how to maintain control over her narrative, protect her privacy, and mitigate the impact of public exposure. Meghan's awareness of these dynamics demonstrates her capacity to navigate complex social, familial, and public pressures with sophistication and foresight. The decision to cut ties also involved a deep ethical dimension. Meghan had to reconcile her love for her father with the reality of his actions, specifically, the monetization of private family moments and the breach of trust that accompanied it. She recognized that continued contact could implicitly condone or normalize behavior that violated her core values. By establishing boundaries and distancing herself, Meghan asserted her commitment to integrity, accountability, and self-respect. This ethical framework guided her actions, ensuring that her response was principled, deliberate, and consistent with the lessons instilled by her mother, Doria. Psychologically, estrangement served as a form of self-preservation. When trust is repeatedly violated, individuals are forced to consider the consequences of continued engagement. For Meghan, the potential for further exploitation by her father, coupled with the ongoing media scrutiny, presented a clear risk to her emotional and psychological well-being. Distancing herself was a rational, strategic response designed to safeguard her mental health, protect her personal life, and maintain autonomy over her choices. This approach highlights the importance of self-preservation in contexts where familial relationships intersect with ethical breaches and public exposure. The emotional consequences of estrangement were multifaceted. Meghan experienced grief over the loss of closeness with her father, sadness at the erosion of familial bonds, and occasional guilt for making a decision that went against societal expectations of filial loyalty. Yet, these emotions coexisted with a sense of relief, empowerment, and clarity. By asserting boundaries and prioritizing her well-being, Meghan reclaimed control over her life and narrative, demonstrating resilience, self-awareness, and moral courage. The complexity of these emotions underscores the depth of the decision and the nuanced interplay between love, ethics, and self-preservation. Meghan's decision was also informed by the recognition that trust is a fragile yet foundational element of relationships. Once violated, it may be impossible to fully restore, particularly when actions are repeated or compounded by external factors such as media involvement. Meghan's choice reflects an understanding that enduring relationships require mutual respect, accountability, and consistency. By evaluating her father's actions against these criteria, she concluded that estrangement was necessary, not as a punitive measure, but as a protective and principled response to ongoing breaches of trust. Public perception added an additional layer of complexity. The media often portrayed the estrangement as dramatic, morally ambiguous, or controversial, focusing on sensationalized narratives rather than the ethical and emotional realities underpinning Meghan's decision. In reality, her choice was rooted in careful analysis, emotional intelligence, and a commitment to personal integrity. Estrangement, in this context, is best understood not as a reactionary or selfish act, but as a deliberate, principled, and morally informed decision designed to protect herself and maintain ethical consistency. The process of cutting ties also involved practical considerations. Meghan had to navigate communication boundaries, manage potential public exposure, and anticipate the implications of her actions on her personal and professional life. These considerations required careful planning, foresight, and strategic thinking. Meghan's ability to manage these challenges demonstrates not only her emotional maturity, but also her capacity to integrate ethical, psychological, and practical considerations in high-stakes decision-making. The estrangement was therefore a holistic response, encompassing moral, emotional, and practical dimensions. In essence, the decision to distance herself from Thomas Markle represents a culmination of years of observation, reflection, and ethical deliberation. It was informed by a deep understanding of human behavior, the fragility of trust, and the consequences of ethical breaches. Meghan's response illustrates the intersection of emotional intelligence, moral reasoning, and self-preservation, a combination that enabled her to navigate an extraordinarily complex and emotionally charged situation with clarity, courage, and integrity. Finally, the decision to cut ties set the stage for subsequent developments in Meghan's life, including her interactions with the media, her public image, and her personal relationships. By establishing boundaries, she was able to reclaim a measure of control over her narrative, protect her emotional well-being, and navigate the complexities of public scrutiny with strategic foresight. This decision, while difficult and emotionally taxing, demonstrates a profound understanding of trust, loyalty, and self-respect, lessons that resonate far beyond the specifics of her family's situation.